Hello, my name is Aaron, welcome to another video. Today we're looking at 5 tips and tricks for the Sony a5100. Now previously I've made a couple of other videos counting down tips and tricks for the Sony a5100, so if you want to check out these other ones first, I'll link them in the description below. But before we get started, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video. Now the first tip is to help save you battery, and that is turning airplane mode on the camera. Basically the Sony a5100 uses quite a small battery, so it can run out quite quickly and it's not always convenient to have a charger with you or spare batteries. So to help prolong your battery life for as long as possible, you can use airplane mode, and that just turns off some of the settings that are running in the background which will drain your battery, such as NFC and Wi-Fi. To change this setting, you go to wireless settings on the main menu and then tab 1, and then there you can see airplane mode. Now the second tip is AF drive speed, which is autofocus drive speed. This is a really interesting one for when you are making video. This setting controls the speed that your autofocus will focus on one object onto another. By changing the AF drive speed, you are selecting how quickly you want that autofocus to happen. So if you have it on slow, it will be quite a smooth transition, slow transition to the second object. If you have it on fast, it will move quicker. So right now I've got it on normal. If I put my hand in front of the camera, you can see that the focus changes to my hand quite quickly. So here's a couple of examples now of it in slow. Normal. And fast. Slow can be quite useful because it makes that transition just a little bit more smoother. Fast is useful when you need to change your focus point quickly. So to change your AF drive speed, you simply go to camera settings, tab 4, and then AF drive speed. My third tip is grid overlay. This is useful for photography especially. Now as standard there is no grid on the screen, so you'll just see your settings on the screen but you don't have a grid over the top. You have 3 different grids that you can add for different purposes. First of these is the rule of thirds grid. This will put a horizontal and vertical lines at a third of the image from the left and the right and the top and the bottom. Rule of thirds is a photography principle which argues that having your subject a third of the way into the shot makes a more pleasing composition. So you can use the rule of thirds grid to get things lined up very quickly, exactly a third of the way into the shot. The next one is square grid. This adds more squares onto your screen, and I find this very useful for stuff like horizons, where you want your horizon to be perfectly straight, or any other straight horizontal line that you want to line up, or vertical line, but I primarily use this one for perfectly straight and central horizon lines. The third one is diagonal and square grid. To be honest, I don't really use this one, but I like the idea of it. This basically adds a diagonal grid line across your shot. If you want to get a more creative shot where your subject is going diagonally across the frame, but you want that diagonal line to be perfectly straight through your subject. So to turn the grid on or off on the Sony a5100, you go to Custom Settings, tab 1, and then Grid Lines. So my fourth tip is metering mode. What is metering mode? Basically, it's telling the camera how to balance light for the exposure of your shot. So to explain this further, we'll go through the 3 different settings that you can choose for metering mode. First setting, multi, reads the light levels at all different zones across the camera's frame and adjusts the light accordingly, balancing the light from all zones of your composition. I use this the most, and this is useful if your shot has dark and light areas and your subject is essentially filling the whole frame. The second one is center weight. This basically exposes the image based on the light just in the very center of your shot. This is good if you want to draw focus just to the very center of your image, and the center is the place that you want to bring emphasis on, so the light will just be perfect for there, and then everything else is kind of more in the background. So a headshot, for example, you may use this setting. The third of these is spot focus point. You choose your spot that you want to focus on in the image. So say you've got the camera set up on a tripod and you're trying to capture an image of a bird which you're expecting to land on a branch or is already there. You want that light to be perfectly exposed for a tiny area of the shot, isn't necessarily the middle. Perfect for wildlife photography where your subject is going to be very small and in a very exact point of the image, and you want the light to be balanced perfectly for the camera for that one shot. So to change your metering mode settings, you go to camera settings and then they're on tab 5, and you can see the 3 settings: multi, center and spot. Now my fifth and final tip for this video is HDR images on the Sony a5100. HDR is high dynamic range images. This adds lots of extra vibrancy and colour to your image without oversaturating things. My favourite way of doing this is using the continuous bracket drive mode. This basically means you're going to be taking images that are under and overexposed as well as on exposure, and then in your editing software such as Adobe Lightroom or whatever you're using at home, you can layer these three images on top of each other to get the perfect HDR image. Now you can use continuous bracket to even take 5 images, which means you'd have 2 overexposed, 2 underexposed, and then that single perfect exposure in the middle, and then you can have an even richer image by doing this. To get to your drive modes, you simply just press left on the main control wheel, or you can go to camera settings and then tab 2, and then you need to scroll down to cont bracket continuous bracket. And by pressing left and right once you have continuous bracket selected, you can choose your different settings. Now I'm going to link here to a video all about drive modes which I've made previously, and it goes into how to change these settings and how they work and some more examples in more depth. So that's it, 5 tips and tricks for the Sony a5100. Remember there's those 2 other videos that I've linked in the description which are other tips and tricks for the Sony a5100. Also, are there any tips and tricks that you use on this camera that I've not thought about? Let me know in the comments below. But if you've enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video. But that's it from me for now. Cheers.